Good afternoon to all, and welcome to our panel on food science and nutritional quality. My name is Έφη Λαζαρίδου. I'm the CEO of New Agriculture, New Generation. This is a non-profit organization that was established with the initiative of Stavros Niarchos Foundation. Today, together with Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey, we are bringing together two global thinkers in the area of food science and technology. We have with us Ryan Dowdy, Science and Technology Analysis Manager at the Good Food Institute. Hello, Ryan.
Hello, Effie.
And we have together Dr. Joshua Anthony, founder and CEO from Nlumn. Am I pronouncing it well, correctly, Anthony? Yeah, thank you, Josh. So today, humanity is facing a tremendous challenge to provide a growing world population with healthy diets from sustainable food systems that operate within the planetary boundaries. Moreover, we, as consumers, we are now more than ever conscious and engaged in how our food, health, and wellness choices can improve our lives. We are on the verge of tectonic changes, both in terms of production and consumption. To this end, we every day come across dietary trends that are new to us, and we come across new foods, be it in the way of new materials or techniques, or maybe foods that are historically consumed in certain regions in the world, but have now very recently been introduced to the global food market. So, Ryan, why is it so compelling today to design new foods? Which are the new foods that are being designed as we speak? And what kind of challenges and opportunities are these trying to address?
Thank you, Effie, and thanks to New Agriculture, New Generation for hosting this panel. We are in the middle of a global transition of our food system as we race towards a population of 10 billion humans by the year 2050. The recent report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change made it clear that we need a rapid transformation of our food system towards a more sustainable model. In this way, we can help to mitigate the effects of climate change and provide new foods that can meet the growing demand of consumers across the world in a more sustainable fashion on a planet that's continuing to heat up. These new foods that we support at the Good Food Institute include plant-based meat and cultivated meat, made from plants or cultivated directly from animal cells. And these new foods offer the opportunity to provide the meat that people want without the negative climate effects that we see with the current industrial animal agriculture model.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Josh? What would you like to contribute to this?
Yeah, sure. I think Ryan hit on some very important points there as it relates to sustainability. But in partnership with sustainability, more and more consumers are looking to take control of their health through their food. So that's really become a focus of many new products. It's both making sure that it is more sustainable and a healthier choice. And this has only been underscored by the global COVID pandemic, where people have come to understand that their lifestyle choices are important risk factors to their health. Finally, I'll just underscore that the younger generation, particularly Generation Z, looks at health of body and health of planet together. So for those consumers now that were born between 1997 and 2012, and as their spending power grows, they're looking for products that bring those two parts together. So it's about health of the body and health of the planet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. According to the recent Food Safety Foresight Report published by the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, there are several, let's say, food safety hazards linked with these new trends in our diet. What are the nutritional and food safety challenges of these trends, and how can research and the manufacturers what do they need to do to overcome those challenges?
Thanks, Effie. For these new foods, one of the very interesting opportunities that they give is that for sustainable proteins, there's significantly less risk of foodborne illness. The reason for that is when meat is produced through industrial animal agriculture, there's a lot of fecal contamination from the animals that then becomes a foodborne illness risk to the consumer. But because sustainable proteins are made from meat or cultivated directly from animal cells, they don't require there to be fecal contamination at all. So you end up with a much cleaner product for the consumer at the end of the day. In addition to the benefit to the consumer, on a global public health perspective, we've seen that industrial animal agriculture can contribute to antibiotic resistance and to the risk of another pandemic occurring. And so sustainable proteins, because they're made from plants or cultivated directly from animal cells without the need for the use of antibiotics, they offer a very interesting opportunity because they can satisfy the demand for meat without having to use antibiotics and without having to increase the risk of another global pandemic.
Josh?
Yeah, I think Ryan called out some very important positives, but I think we also have to look at the other side of some of the key trends that we're seeing or changes that we're seeing in potential impact. And looking a little bit beyond just sort of the plant-based plant-based protein alternatives that are out there. Climate change, as Ryan started talking about, are causing some important shifts. And with that, we're seeing, the potential movement of, pests or toxins that weren't in other regions. Aflatoxin used to be more of an issue of Africa, and now it's established in the Mediterranean. As we're looking at plant-based alternatives and people are consuming new products, we have to be thinking about new allergies that might be in the food supply. With things like aquaculture that offer a lot of promise when we think about the nutrition of macroalgae and the ability to help to provide nutrition for a rapidly growing world, we also have to consider things like heavy metal accumulations. I'm not bringing these things up as negatives, but I think as we're thinking about a shifting food supply, we also have to be thinking about the challenges as well.
Exactly. And where do we stand as consumers today? What are the beliefs, the behavior, the perceptions that guide our everyday choices? How ready are we for these new trends and new dietary models?
Effie, that's a great question. So in general, humans are very wary of trying new foods. That's how we evolved, and it's how we survived. We're very wary of trying new foods that we're not familiar with, that we haven't seen before, that we haven't tasted before. It's just the way that we're hardwired as a species. There hasn't been a whole lot of research done into this, but in 2021, the University of Copenhagen released a study, and they interviewed 2,000 people in Croatia and Greece and Spain, and they found that even though about half of the people had never heard of cultivated meat, those folks would be willing to try cultivated meat, and they'd be willing to buy it if it cost the same or less as conventional animal proteins. So there's a market for it, and what this study found was that when consumers are trying to reduce their meat consumption, they found that the main drivers are their own health, its environmental reasons, and its animal welfare. So consumer perception is huge when it comes to food in general, but in terms of new foods, we're seeing that many times people are willing to try these products. And once they try them, if they taste the same or better and they cost the same or less, then these foods will end up being a long-term consumer choice.
So Josh, are we ready to consume edible insects and algae and jellyfish? What do you think?
To an extent. There's still going to be some barriers for some consumers, and that's understandable. But I do agree that people are trying things more now than ever before. If you look at the average grocery store in the US in the 1970s, they had about 5,000 items. That's more than 50,000 items today. And that shows that people are really demanding more choices. The challenge with a lot of these different things is sometimes you have people that aren't going to be willing to try jellyfish or aren't going to be willing to try insect protein, and it's hard to get them over that barrier. There's a lot of people that are willing to try it, but it remains for them a novelty. They'll try it to say that they've had it. So it's a question of how do you make these alternate sources sticky so that you could build a supply chain so you can offer them at a comparative price? And I think the way to do that is to tie it to different provenance, you know, the story of where it's from or the cultural history, where some of these different products are, you know, or alternate sources are already being used as part of the food supply. Culinary trends right now are very consistent with elevating regional trends and regional cuisine. So if it's not just about the novelty factor, but it's about feeling good about supporting agriculture and tradition and culinary trends, then I think you have the ability to have greater adoption. And I think, again, that could be a very, very good way to promote these alternate sources and help to make them stick.
That's awesome. I think that's a good way to look at it. Let me come to you now, Josh, because this is a domain that you are particularly interested and very active in. Today, we see consumers leverage tools such as technology and information to make critical decisions regarding diets and lifestyle choices. So within this context, we gradually seem to shift from the one-size-fits-all diet to a more personalized approach to our nutritional lifestyle models. So are there any, let's say, principles that guide this particular angle? Are there concrete benefits for all? How can we, let's say, adapt within certain dietary choices? And what may be the barriers to entry towards such an approach?
Yeah, so let's talk about some of the potential benefits and then talk about some of the challenges. A key driver right now for more personalized approaches to health, beyond the fact that people are seeking a greater level of customization in all aspects of their life, is that technology is getting to a point where it's more accessible and better able to measure changes, sometimes real-time changes when you think about things like continuous glucose monitors, to understand your unique biological needs. So the first promise of personalized nutrition is nutrition that is linked to your biological needs, which aren't necessarily going to be the same today or tomorrow, and certainly aren't necessarily going to be the same between you and I, or Ryan and I. And so that's an exciting opportunity. Where I do think, though, that maybe doesn't get enough attention is the biology, and maybe harder to change is people's behavior. It's one thing to measure biomarkers and help people understand what they should eat or how they should be eating. It's another thing to get them to change behavior. For years and years, public health recommendations have been saying to reduce sugar, to reduce sodium, reduce saturated fat. We haven't been very successful in that. And the evidence actually suggests that more personalized approaches to nutrition may actually be more successful in driving behavior change. In a study that we recently published last year, we actually showed that a personalized dietary pattern was successful, and more successful oftentimes than public health recommendations, in terms of reducing sodium. We reduced sodium by 20%. We reduced sugar intake by 20%. We reduced saturated fat intake by 23%. We saw increases in positive nutrient consumption of vitamin A, vitamin C, beta-carotene, fiber, things suggesting more fruit and vegetable intake. So it's one study of a series of emerging studies, but suggesting that helping people eat to their biology may motivate them to make healthier choices that are actually consistent with greater health. So that's positive. We have better technology than ever before to be able to measure people's needs. And we have tools to suggest that that may actually improve their behavior. But here's the problem. Oftentimes these tools are expensive. They require a fair amount of education. You're dealing with consumers that are already managing data and willing to take prescriptive advice. You're dealing with a subset of people that basically have access to personalization that are relatively healthy and relatively wealthy. So what we need to be able to do is make these personalized systems accessible and affordable to more people, because it is actually the people in the lower socioeconomic statuses that are disproportionately affected by chronic diseases of lifestyle. So that's where we really need to be looking at more ways and, to provide public access to more personalized choices, to provide the education that enables the behavior change, and provide the tools, which the biggest way to change personalized nutrition behavior is to provide the healthy foods that we were talking about earlier today, to make sure there is accessibility and affordability for people, to make sure that they're getting the right balance of macro and micronutrients in a format that they can enjoy.
Mm-hmm. This calls for a democratization of the personalized nutritional approach, I think. What do you have to say, Ryan, about this?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with what Josh said, particularly with regards to changing human behaviors. Mm-hmm. For consumers, when it comes to food, it's known that the three primary drivers are taste, price, and convenience. That's what dictates the food choices that people make. And like Josh said, it's very difficult to change those behaviors, especially when there's an ingrained pattern of food, whatever that diet may be. So it's difficult to change those behaviors. And so instead of working to convince people to eat differently, which doctors and public health professionals have been doing for years, please eat less meat. It's known globally that this is an issue. That hasn't worked, though. And so in the same way, we're not going to be able to convince people to drive their cars less or to use less energy. These are climate problems as well. Similarly, the global food system is a huge climate problem. So we've got to be able to provide turnkey solutions where people can just buy the products that they want. And so with regards to personalized nutrition, one of the opportunities that sustainable proteins offer is that, for example, with sustainable proteins, you can take the personalized nutrition approach. You can develop products that are higher in specific vitamins for specific populations. You can develop products that don't have the allergens for specific groups, or let's say don't have the proteins that are known to cause cancer. So there's a lot to be done for personalized nutrition as we're moving towards a healthier planet. And the main thing is we've got to be able to supply those products to consumers, and they have to be conveniently located. If it's not in a nearby grocery store, no one's going to buy it.
Well, all these call for technological innovations, scientific advances, and where do we stand on that? What kind of technology trends are paving the way right now? What do we expect to see in the future? Josh?
Yeah, I think that a few things is that
I'm sorry, Josh.
If we look at the value chain.
Sorry, Josh, we can't hear you very well. Can you?
Yeah, is that better?
Yes. Can the technicians a bit help? Thank you very much. Yes.
Okay.
The floor is yours.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay. I think that in the past, when we've thought about technology and we've thought about the value chain, we've thought about innovation somewhat in silos. And that's so you have the ag tech aspect of it, you have the ingredient supplier aspect, you have the manufacturer aspect, you have retail aspect. And we have to be looking at this more as an ecosystem. And where I am seeing a lot of technology advances is really reducing those cycles between farm to table by having ag tech and ingredient and manufacturing suppliers working together. And we're actively being able to reduce the cycle from seed to ingredient through new technologies that really allow you to kind of optimize growth conditions. We're seeing work being done in the soil with things like the soil microbiome, which is enabling new understandings in terms of how the plant microbiome can improve growth and improve health. One of the things that I'm really encouraged by, though, is also, and this gets a little bit to some of what Ryan was talking about, is our work to understand the nutrient value of plants, not just the nutrients that show up on the back of label. But we've really only uncovered a very small amount or have a very limited understanding of the different phytochemicals that are in plants and what their potential value might be. We often hear people say that whole foods are better than supplements. And that's because that food has evolved to interact with its ecosystem. So we really need to understand that so that we can build a better seed, so that ingredient suppliers can create better ingredients, and that they can work with formulators to help to deliver more sustainable and nutrition sources that hit on all those important things that Ryan called out. Because it's not, food is not just about nutrition. It is not just about sustainability. It is about, enjoyment. It is about, it is about socialization. In my family, and I'm sure in a lot of yours, food is about love. So it has to meet all of these needs. It has to nourish the body. It has to nourish the planet and nourish the soul. And I think what we're realizing by bringing this ecosystem together are technologies that will allow us to do all of those things.
Mm-hmm. Ryan?
Yeah, Effie, food technology it's got to be centered around the human experience. And speaking to what Josh says about food is love, one of my favorite chefs and scientists, Alton Brown, said the purpose of food is to bring people together and to get them to speak. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more with that. So globally, we're seeing a lot of interesting changes in food technology, and we've seen a huge explosion recently. So just to highlight a few case studies, right now, the government of Singapore is leading in cultivated meat. So Singapore was the first government globally to approve cultivated meat for sale. And right now in Singapore, they sell cultivated meat, cultivated chicken specifically, at a food stall every day in Singapore. So they're leading. Governments in Israel and Canada are leading as well for investments in food tech. And we're starting to see a lot of pilot plants open that are producing cultivated meat for consumers. We're seeing them open around the world. When it comes to plant-based meat, we've seen a lot of interesting developments that include heme, plant-based heme. That's the compound in meat that gives it its red color and its meaty flavor. And so being able to produce that from plants is one of the recent technological innovations that has really made plant-based meat appealing to consumers.
We would appreciate if we had some more quiet in the room, please. Thank you. So food systems is a complex ecosystem, and food manufacturers are a key component in that. So what is actually being done to assist food production systems shift towards these new directions? How can research and also funding tools provide the necessary resources for food manufacturers to make the transition as effectively and as quickly as possible?
That's a great question, Effie. So I want to highlight sort of where we are today and where we need to be moving and what governments can do to help us move in that direction. So where we are today is that Europe is an enormous plant-based meat market. Right now, Europe captures 40% of the global plant-based meat market. It's enormous. Annually, it's about $4 billion, 4 billion euros in revenue. And it's expected to grow at about 9% compound annual growth rate from now until 2028. So it's a huge market, and it's expected to continue to grow. However, the challenge is that historically, agriculture has been underfunded by governments around the world, as opposed to transportation and energy sectors when it comes to climate solutions. So it's very necessary right now for governments to invest in food tech as a scalable climate solution, specifically alternative proteins, because they're able to provide the meat that people want without the negative climate impacts.
Josh?
I'm going to look at this. I spent a lot of time on the manufacturing side of this in my career, so I'm going to look at it a little bit from the manufacturing end. An unfortunate reality in the US and Europe is that a lot of companies have really focused more on development at the expense of basic research. There's such a drive or such a consumer desire for new products that they're just not able to invest as much time and effort into discovery. And really part of the way to overcome that is, one, working more closely with ingredient suppliers to help to make sure that the ingredients can meet consumer needs. Because oftentimes they may be thinking about some of the sustainability or health benefits of the ingredient, but they may not have the expertise that the manufacturer has with respect to kind of understanding how it performs in the product, how it tastes in the product, how's that maintained at shelf. And obviously, one of the important things we've talked about many times today is cost. So I'm seeing some examples, but there needs to be more and more of these examples where you have manufacturers that are working side by side with some of their ingredient suppliers. That said, it's not enough. And I think that there should be a big call for action for public-private partnerships, which really can bring together government funding agencies, that can bring together academia, ingredient suppliers, and manufacturers. Because I think that there's an opportunity for a lot of pre-competitive early discovery work that can be done, that can be targeted to the needs for the population. I still remain very concerned about making sure that the most nutritious, sustainable choices are accessible. An accessible part of that is making better products. But Ryan said something else that's very important. It's just people being able to get to these products. A lot of the poor areas, you don't have supermarkets, or you don't have the ability for online ordering. You have, small corner stores that, typically are underserved when it comes to like the fresh, healthy products that they need.
Mm-hmm. And as we are approaching the end of this very interesting discussion, I would like to pose the last question to both of you, and I think we can afford 1 minute for each. So within this new context, this new era, what room do we have for traditional diets such as the Mediterranean diet, the Greek diet, that are very much linked to cultural heritage? How much room is there for such foods, for protected denomination of origin foods or other, local delicacies to thrive in such an environment?
This is a great question. One of the things I want to highlight is that while I was working at NASA and managing the food system for the International Space Station, one of the biggest changes we made was to change the menu away from the Western diet and towards the Mediterranean diet. We put more fruits and vegetables on the menu for the International Space Station than ever before. We put on freeze-dried Brussels sprouts, braised red cabbage, kale salad, delicious options that were there, that were available. They were ready to be chosen by the astronauts. Because they tasted good and they were available, people ate them and they got the nutrition out of them. So working with the astronauts and the nutritionists, and by the way, the nutritionists at NASA would tell me the Mediterranean diet is the one that has the longest history and the best track record when it comes to human health. So that's what we work to shift the diet towards there. And when it comes to Greece, I love all of the PDO products in Greece. The honey, the fava, the olive oil, it's amazing. And I think that Greece really has a lot to offer because globally, sustainable proteins are looking at a pea protein shortage. Mm-hmm. This is well known. And that's why companies like Purus and Roquette in North America are scaling up production. They're building factories. They're producing millions of metric tons, and it's still not enough to satisfy consumer demand. And so that's one of the things where I think Greece can really leverage its historical expertise in fava and lentils to satisfy the growing demand for the plant-based meat market in Europe.
That's awesome. Josh? We can't hear you. Are you muted, maybe?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'll speak fast.
No worries.
2 things I want to highlight. I'm a big fan of the Mediterranean diet because while it's a dietary pattern, there's a lot of flexibility in it. It's an inherently healthy foundation, but at the same time, it allows for a degree of personalization to meet many people's needs. So I think that it can be a foundation for a healthy diet and lean into some of the personalization trends. With respect to some of the PDO products, the thing that I'll underscore there is I will come back to understanding what makes them special. The great thing about them is the heritage and the taste. It's already there, right? So Greece is on the leading edge of that. So now the opportunity is to start to pull that apart to kind of understand further what are some of the health benefits. because I think that at the end of the day, what you have is an opportunity to have a Mediterranean foundation with special PDO ingredients that are part of Greece's cultural heritage, and you can have a situation where the healthier product, the more sustainable product, is the better tasting product, and that's what will make it sticky.
Fantastic. You gave us lots of food for thought. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure. So, thank you, and thank you to our audience.
Thank you.